The impossible solution. Sarah Chen had expected some odd looks when she transferred to the Galactic Academy of Sciences. After all, humans weren't exactly common in the prestigious institution's halls. What she hadn't expected was the complete silence that fell over Laboratory Complex 7 as she casually solved what her classmates had dubbed the impossible equation. The problem had been projected onto the quantum holographic display at the front of the cavernous lecture hall, its swirling mathematical symbols casting a soft blue glow across the assembled faces of the galaxy's brightest young minds. Professor KZZT, their Arcturian instructor whose crystalline form sparkled with barely contained excitement, had presented it as an interesting theoretical challenge. Consider this unsolvable problem, they had hummed, their crystalline resonances translating perfectly through the universal translators. It has stumped our finest minds for centuries. The mathematical relationship between dark matter condensation and quantum gravity in a binary star system. Sarah, sitting in the back row of the terraced hall, had already started scribbling in her ancient paper notebook, a habit that had earned her more than a few confused stares from her classmates, who preferred direct neural interfaces. The scratch of her pencil was the only sound in the otherwise silent room. Axel, the Vesperan student floating next to her, twisted their gas-form body into what Sarah had learned was their species' equivalent of a concerned frown. "Sarah friend, why do you waste energy on this exercise? The problem is mathematically impossible. Even our quantum computers cannot." The human girl didn't look up from her notebook, her dark eyes focused intently on the rapidly filling pages. "Shoo," she muttered, "I think I see something." Around them, other students were engaging their neural nets, their various appendages and sensory organs glowing with the characteristic blue light of active quantum computing. Some had multiple bodies working in parallel, while others existed purely as fields of conscious energy. Yet none of them seemed to be making progress. The fascinating aspect of this problem, Professor KZZT continued, their crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns that indicated deep satisfaction, is how it demonstrates the fundamental limits of our understanding. Even after thousands of years of study, some cosmic mysteries remain beyond our grasp. "Excuse me, Professor." The entire class turned, some rotating entire bodies, others shifting sensory fields, to stare at Sarah, who had raised her hand. Her notebook lay open before her, covered in what looked to most of her classmates like primitive scratches. "Yes, Student Chen." Professor KZZT's crystal lattice structure rearranged itself into what Sarah recognized as their equivalent of raised eyebrows. "I think I might have a solution." Sarah's voice was quiet but confident. She stood, clutching her notebook, and made her way down to the front of the hall. The other students parted before her, some literally splitting their forms to create a path. "Impossible," whispered XTL, a hive mind of quantum-entangled particles. "The human's neural capacity is far too limited." Sarah reached the quantum holographic display and, after a moment's hesitation, began to write. Her simple pencil markings were automatically scanned and projected, appearing alongside the original problem in glowing blue light. The room watched in stunned silence as she worked, her hand moving steadily across the page. Where the original equation had been a complex web of quantum variables and 11-dimensional matrices, Sarah's solution was elegant. Simple, almost. "You see," she explained, pointing to a particular section of her work, "if you look at it from a terrestrial perspective, it's actually similar to how we model weather patterns on Earth. The dark matter condensation behaves a lot like high-pressure systems interacting with multiple gravity wells." But that's primitive meteorology," burst out Tlax, a student composed entirely of crystallized light. "How could that possibly apply to quantum-scale cosmic phenomena?" Sarah smiled, tucking a strand of black hair behind her ear. "Because patterns repeat across scales. We learned this on Earth pretty early on, had to, really, given how many different ways our planet tries to kill us daily. Weather, plate tectonics, ocean currents, they all follow similar mathematical principles. Once you understand the underlying patterns." She gestured to her solution, now complete. It's just a matter of applying the same principles at a quantum level. The math is actually simpler than predicting a Category 5 hurricane's path. Professor KZZT had gone completely still, their crystalline structure frozen in what Sarah hoped was amazement rather than anger. The rest of the class seemed to be experiencing various species-specific versions of shock. Finally, the professor spoke, their harmonics vibrating at a frequency Sarah had never heard before. Student Chen, this is correct. But more than correct, it's elegant. You've reduced a problem that has puzzled our greatest minds for centuries to something a child could understand. Well, Sarah shrugged, that's kind of the point, isn't it? Science should make the complex simple, not the other way around. At least, that's what we learned on Earth. When you're living on a death world, you can't afford to overcomplicate things. A death world, Axel whispered, their gaseous form swirling in agitation. Of course. Only a species evolved to survive constant threats would develop such direct problem-solving abilities. Professor KZZT's crystal structure had begun to pulse with a deep blue light, excitement, Sarah had learned. Student Chen, would you be willing to explain your methodology in more detail? I believe we may all have something to learn from the unique perspective your species has developed. Sarah glanced around the room, taking in the various forms of her alien classmates. Some were still projecting disbelief, others curiosity, and a few, was that respect she was seeing? Of course, Professor, she said, turning back to the board. It's really quite simple. You see, on Earth, we learned early on that everything's connected. The movement of tectonic plates affects ocean currents, which affect weather patterns, which affect everything from migration patterns to evolution itself. When you're trying to survive on a planet that's constantly trying to kill you, you learn to see these connections pretty quickly. As she began to explain, Sarah couldn't help but smile. Maybe this was why humans had been invited to join the galactic community in the first place. Not despite their death world origins, but because of them. Sometimes, it took a species that had evolved facing constant challenges to see the simple solutions that others had overlooked. The quantum holographic display continued to glow, her Earth-inspired solution now permanently recorded in the Academy's archives. It would be the first of many such contributions, though neither Sarah nor her stunned classmates knew it yet. The age of human problem-solving in the galaxy had begun. The challenge. News of Sarah Chen's solution spread through the Galactic Academy of Sciences like a quantum wave collapse. Within days, the human student had become something of a curiosity among both faculty and students. Some viewed her with skepticism, others with fascination, but none could deny the elegance of her solution to what they had long considered an unsolvable problem. Professor KZZT's crystalline form shimmered with an intense violet hue as they addressed the gathered faculty council. The chamber, a vast geodesic sphere lined with quantum computing arrays, housed the Academy's most distinguished minds, or their equivalent, depending on species. The human solution challenges everything we thought we knew about cognitive development in Death World species, KZZT resonated. Perhaps we have been overconfident in our assumptions. Dean X Whiteowl, a being of pure energy contained within a field of artificial gravity, pulsed with skepticism. One lucky insight does not invalidate millennia of established theory. The human brain is demonstrably simpler than even our most basic quantum processors. And yet, came the melodious tones of Professor Lirith, whose serpentine form coiled around one of the chamber's floating platforms. She solved in minutes what our quantum processors couldn't solve in centuries. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of debate, some voices audible, others communicated through light patterns, electromagnetic pulses, or quantum entanglement. Sarah Chen, waiting outside in the anteroom, could hear only fragments of the discussion through the chamber's theoretical physics-grade soundproofing. She wasn't alone. Axel hovered nearby, their gaseous form swirling with what Sarah had learned to recognize as anxiety. They've been in there for 3 standard hours, the Vesperan student observed. This is unprecedented. Sarah nodded, trying to maintain her composure while her stomach tied itself in knots. Any idea what they're deciding? The faculty council rarely convenes unless... Axel's form rippled. Unless they're considering something momentous. The chamber doors finally dissolved, reorganizing their atomic structure to create an opening. Dean Xytal's energy form pulsed with formal patterns as they addressed Sarah. "Student Chen, please enter." The human girl straightened her uniform and stepped into the chamber, conscious of every eye, sensory organ, and quantum detector focused on her. The doors reformed behind her with a soft hum of reassembling atoms. "Student Chen," Dean Xytal began, their energy form casting shifting shadows across the chamber. "Your recent solution to the dark matter condensation problem has caused quite a stir in our academic community. Some suggest it was a fluke. Others believe it reveals previously unconsidered approaches to theoretical physics." Sarah stood her ground, hands clasped behind her back. "I just solved it the way we would on Earth, Dean Xytal. Sometimes the simplest solution is the one we overlook because we're expecting complexity." A ripple of what might have been amusement, or derision, passed through the assembled faculty. Indeed, Professor KZZT chimed in, their crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns. "And that is why we have decided to present you with a challenge." The center of the chamber illuminated with a holographic display, showing a series of equations and diagrams that made Sarah's eyes widen. Even at first glance, she could tell this was far more complex than the previous problem. "This," Dean Xytal explained, their energy form intensifying, "is the Helios paradox. It involves the interaction between quantum entanglement and temporal mechanics in the core of a dying star. For 10,000 years, it has defied solution. Even our most advanced AI systems cannot resolve its fundamental contradictions." Sarah studied the equations, her mind already beginning to draw parallels with phenomena she understood from Earth. The quantum fluctuations reminded her of something. "You have one standard week," Professor Lirith announced, their scales shimming with bioluminescent patterns. "If you can solve this, you will have proven that your previous success was more than mere chance. If not..." The serpentine alien left the consequence unspoken. "And what happens if I do solve it?" Sarah asked, still examining the holographic display. The faculty exchanged what passed for glances among their various species. Dean Xytal's energy form pulsed once, decisively. "If you succeed, we will be forced to reconsider many of our fundamental assumptions about human cognitive capabilities. And..." They paused for effect. "You will be granted full access to the Academy's Advanced Theoretical Physics Division, something no undergraduate has ever achieved." Sarah felt her heart race but kept her expression neutral. The Advanced Theoretical Physics Division was legendary. It was said they worked on problems that could reshape the understanding of the universe itself. "I accept," she said simply. "Very well." Dean Xytal's form flickered. "1 week, Student Chen. We await your solution, or lack thereof." As Sarah left the chamber, her mind was already racing. The quantum entanglement patterns in the dying star's core, they reminded her of something she'd seen in her mother's kitchen back on Earth. Something about the way water molecules behaved when Axel was waiting outside, their gaseous form swirling with curiosity. "Well, what did they decide?" Sarah grinned, pulling out her notebook. "They gave me a puzzle, Axel. A really good one. And I'm going to need your help to solve it." "My help?" Axel's form rippled with surprise. "But I'm just a standard student. I don't have any special insights or advanced quantum processing capabilities." "No," Sarah agreed, already sketching in her notebook. "But you have something better. You have a perspective I don't. And if there's one thing we learned on Earth, it's that sometimes you need to look at a problem from every possible angle to find the solution." As they headed toward the library, Sarah couldn't help but smile. The faculty thought they were testing her limits, but they didn't understand. On Earth, limits were just challenges waiting to be overcome. And Sarah Chen had never been one to back down from a challenge. She had a week to solve the unsolvable. Time to show the galaxy what human ingenuity could really do. The solution. 3 days into her week-long challenge, Sarah Chen had turned one of the Academy's study pods into what her alien classmates could only describe as organized chaos. The curved walls were covered with paper notes, an archaic human method that had drawn more than a few bewildered stares. Holographic projections flickered throughout the space, showing everything from quantum simulations to, puzzlingly, videos of boiling water. "I still don't understand," Axel said, their gaseous form condensing slightly in confusion. "What do Earth cooking methods have to do with quantum entanglement in a dying star?" Sarah, who had been staring intently at a pot of bubbling liquid on a portable heating unit, held up a finger. "Watch what happens when the water reaches its boiling point. See how the bubbles form and interact." "Yes, but dash." "The patterns," Sarah interrupted, pointing to a holographic display of the star's quantum matrix. "They're similar. Not exactly the same, of course, but the underlying principles. It's like what happens in my mom's pressure cooker, just at a quantum level." Flax, who had joined their study group out of what they claimed was scientific curiosity, emitted a burst of crystallized light that Sarah had learned to interpret as exasperation. "That's absurd. You can't compare simple fluid dynamics to quantum temporal mechanics." "Why not?" Sarah challenged, standing up to face her crystalline classmate. "That's exactly what humans do. We look for patterns, for similarities between things that seem different on the surface. It's how we survived on Earth. Everything's connected, you just have to learn to see the connections." "But your methodology is so primitive," Flax protested, their light fluctuating. "You're using paper and water instead of quantum computers and probability matrices." Sarah smiled, picking up her notebook. "Sometimes the simplest tools are the best ones. When you're dealing with complex problems, it helps to break them down into something you can see and touch." She paused, looking at Flax apologetically. "Well, for those of us who have physical forms, anyway." Axel drifted closer to the boiling pot, their gaseous form analyzing the steam patterns. I think I'm beginning to understand. The way the bubbles form and collapse, it's not unlike quantum probability collapse in the star's core." "Exactly," Sarah exclaimed, quickly sketching something in her notebook. "And when you add pressure, like in a pressure cooker." She stopped suddenly, her eyes widening. The pencil fell from her hand. "Sarah friend?" Axel swirled worriedly. "Are you experiencing a malfunction?" "That's it," Sarah whispered. She rushed to the holographic display, her fingers flying over the controls. "That's what we've been missing. It's not just about the quantum entanglement, it's about the pressure." Flax shifted closer, their crystalline form vibrating with interest despite their skepticism. "Explain." "Look," Sarah said, pulling up the original equations. "Everyone's been focusing on the quantum entanglement patterns in the star's core, trying to resolve them with temporal mechanics. But what if we're looking at it backwards? What if the temporal anomalies aren't causing the entanglement, they're a result of it?" She quickly began inputting new equations, her hands shaking with excitement. "In a pressure cooker, the increased pressure changes how water behaves, it raises the boiling point, alters the way bubbles form and interact. What if the same principle applies here? The massive gravitational pressure in the dying star's core isn't just affecting the quantum states, it's fundamentally altering how time flows through them." Axel and Flax watched in stunned silence as Sarah's new equations took shape on the display. The human girl was working at a feverish pace now, drawing on everything from advanced physics to simple Earth observations. "The Helios paradox isn't a paradox at all," she continued, barely pausing for breath. "It only seems that way because we've been thinking about it in linear terms. But time isn't linear in these conditions, it's more like like water in a pressure cooker. It bubbles and swirls and sometimes flows backward, but always according to consistent patterns. The final equation materialized in the holographic display, elegantly simple despite the complex principles it described. The quantum simulation ran, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the Helios paradox resolved itself without contradictions. The study pod fell silent except for the gentle bubbling of the water pot. "Impossible," Flax whispered, their crystalline form flickering rapidly. "You solved it using cooking." "Not exactly," Sarah said, finally allowing herself to sit down. "I used cooking as a model to understand the underlying principles. The actual solution is pure physics, I just needed a different way of looking at it." Axel's form had turned a deep blue color that Sarah had never seen before. "This will revolutionize our understanding of temporal mechanics. The implications for faster-than-light travel alone. And all because you watched water boil," Flax added, their tone somewhere between amazement and disbelief. Sarah shrugged, but couldn't hide her smile. "Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from the smallest observations. That's another thing we learned on Earth, inspiration can come from anywhere. You just have to be willing to see it." She began gathering her notes, already thinking about how to present her solution to the faculty council. They would want rigorous proofs, of course, but the hard part was done. She had cracked the Helios paradox using nothing more complex than a pot of boiling water and a human mind shaped by evolution on a death world. "You know," Axel said thoughtfully, "perhaps we've been approaching education all wrong. We've been so focused on quantum computing and advanced technology that we've forgotten the value of, what did you call it? Thinking outside the box." "Exactly," Sarah agreed. "Sometimes the best solutions are the ones right in front of us, we just need to look at them from a different angle." As she packed up her makeshift laboratory, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what other, impossible, problems might yield to a little Earth-style thinking. After all, humans had evolved solving puzzles just to survive. Maybe that was their real contribution to galactic science, not advanced technology or complex theories, but the simple ability to see connections where others saw only chaos. The pot of water continued to bubble on its heating unit, its simple patterns holding secrets that had eluded the galaxy's greatest minds for millennia. The presentation. The faculty council chamber hummed with anticipation. Where before there had been skepticism, now there was genuine curiosity as Sarah Chen stood before the assembled academics, her solution to the Helios paradox projected behind her in glowing quantum holographic detail. "As you can see," Sarah explained, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "the temporal anomalies in the star's core follow a pattern similar to fluid dynamics under extreme pressure. Once we understand this relationship, the quantum entanglement effects become predictable rather than paradoxical." Dean X-Whitehall's energy form pulsed with intense patterns that Sarah couldn't quite interpret. "You are suggesting that 10,000 years of theoretical physics can be reduced to cooking?" Sarah suppressed a smile. "Not exactly, Dean. I'm suggesting that complex phenomena often mirror simpler ones. On Earth, we call this fractal patterns, the same basic principles appearing at different scales throughout nature." Professor KZZT's crystalline structure vibrated at a frequency that sent rainbow patterns dancing across the chamber walls. "But this is unprecedented. You've not only solved the paradox, you've provided a framework for understanding similar quantum temporal phenomena throughout the universe." "That's the beauty of it," Sarah said, warming to her subject. "Once you understand the underlying pattern, you can apply it everywhere. It's like..." She paused, considering her audience. "It's like how a Vesperan's gas form movements follow the same mathematical principles as stellar gas formations, just on a different scale." Axel, who had been permitted to attend as Sarah's research partner, swirled with what might have been pride. Professor Lirith uncoiled their serpentine form to its full height. "What fascinates me, Student Chen, is not just your solution, but your methodology. You approached this problem in a way that would never have occurred to us. Because we've never had to survive on a death world, Flax added from their position among the junior faculty. The crystalline being had become one of Sarah's strongest supporters after witnessing her breakthrough. Exactly, Sarah nodded. On Earth, pattern recognition isn't just an academic exercise, it's survival. When your planet is constantly trying to kill you with everything from weather to wildlife, you learn to see connections quickly and think creatively about solutions. The chamber fell silent as the implications of this sank in. It was Dean X. Whitehall who finally spoke, their energy form stabilizing into a more formal configuration. Student Chen, your solution to the Helios paradox will be recorded in the Academy's archives as one of the most significant breakthroughs in theoretical physics of the last millennium. But perhaps even more valuable is the insight you've given us into human cognitive processes. Sarah blinked in surprise. Sir. We have long considered human intelligence to be limited, the Dean continued, their energy patterns shifting in what might have been embarrassment. Your species lacks natural quantum processing capabilities, neural networks, or even basic psychic abilities. But we failed to consider that evolution on a death world might produce different, yet equally valuable, forms of intelligence. Professor KZZT chimed in, their crystalline resonance carrying clear excitement. The human ability to recognize patterns across different scales and contexts, to draw insights from seemingly unrelated phenomena, this is not a limitation, but an adaptation. One that we, in our reliance on pure computational power, have perhaps forgotten. The Advanced Theoretical Physics Division would be honored to have you join us, Professor Lirith added, their scales shimming with bioluminescent approval. We believe your unique perspective could help unlock many more of the universe's mysteries. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with Earth's higher baseline temperature. Thank you, professors. I would be honored. But... Yes. Dean X. Whitehall's form flickered questioningly. I have one condition, Sarah said, straightening her shoulders. I want to establish a new research methodology at the Academy. One that combines traditional quantum computing with what you might call death world thinking. Because I believe both approaches have value, and together they might help us solve problems we haven't even imagined yet. The chamber erupted in discussions, some audible, others conducted through various exotic forms of communication. Sarah waited patiently, aware that she was pushing the boundaries of what was traditionally allowed for a student, even one who had just solved a 10,000-year-old paradox. Finally, Dean X. Whitehall's form pulsed with authority, silencing the chamber. Your proposal is unprecedented. But then, so was your solution to the Helios paradox. Very well, Student Chen. You may establish your research methodology, under the supervision of Professor KZZT. Sarah's face broke into a broad smile, an expression that still unnerved some of her alien colleagues. Thank you, Dean. I promise you won't regret this. As she gathered her materials to leave the chamber, Sarah caught sight of Axel and Flax waiting by the door. Her friends, and yes, she could call them that now, had supported her through this challenge, helping her bridge the gap between human intuition and alien science. Well? Axel swirled expectantly as she approached. We did it, Sarah grinned. They approved everything, the solution, the research methodology, all of it. Of course they did, Flax's crystalline form sparkled. You showed them something they had never seen before, a new way of thinking about the universe itself. As they left the chamber together, a human, a gas being, and a crystal entity, Sarah couldn't help but feel optimistic about the future. Perhaps this was why humanity had been invited to join the galactic community. Not for their technology or their resources, but for their unique way of seeing the world, a perspective forged in the crucible of Earth's harsh environment. The universe was full of mysteries waiting to be solved. And sometimes, the key to understanding them might just lie in something as simple as a pot of boiling water. The legacy. 6 months after Sarah Chen's groundbreaking solution to the Helios paradox, the Galactic Academy of Sciences had changed in ways that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. The newly established Department of Comparative Problem-Solving Methodologies, unofficially dubbed the Earth Room by students, had become one of the most popular research centers in the institution. Sarah stood at the entrance of the department's main laboratory, watching as students from across the galaxy worked together in ways that defied traditional academic boundaries. A group of Vesperans were studying Earth weather patterns, their gaseous forms swirling in mimicry of hurricane formations. Nearby, a collective of crystalline beings analyzed the structural similarities between their own growth patterns and Earth's plate tectonics. Remarkable, Professor KZZT chimed beside her, their crystalline form refracting the lab's light into complex patterns. In all my centuries of teaching, I never imagined I would see quantum physicists taking inspiration from Earth cooking techniques. Sarah smiled, watching as Axel demonstrated the principles of pressure cooking to a group of energy-based beings. Her friend had become one of the department's most enthusiastic advocates, finding surprising connections between Vesperan gas dynamics and Earth's atmospheric phenomena. It's not just about the techniques, Sarah explained. It's about the way of thinking. Humans had to become adaptable to survive on Earth. We learned to see connections everywhere because missing one could mean death. A harsh teacher, Flax observed, their crystalline form now bearing the distinctive markings of a junior faculty member. But an effective one. A commotion near the center of the lab drew their attention. A young Andromedian student, their quantum field vibrating with excitement, had just made a breakthrough in understanding black hole entropy by studying the way water drains in Earth's different hemispheres. You see. Sarah gestured toward the celebrating students. Once you start looking for patterns, you find them everywhere. The universe speaks the same language at every scale, we just need to learn how to listen. Dean X. Whiteowl's energy form manifested beside them, having quietly observed the proceedings. The Academy's Board of Governors has taken notice of your department's success, student, excuse me, Professor Chen. Sarah still wasn't used to her new title, earned after her third major breakthrough in quantum temporal mechanics. Oh. Yes. They are considering implementing similar programs at other galactic institutions. It seems your Deathworld thinking has implications far beyond theoretical physics. Indeed, Sarah's methodology had already found applications in fields ranging from xenobiology to faster-than-light drive design. The combination of Earth-inspired pattern recognition with advanced alien technology had opened up entirely new avenues of research. I received a fascinating communication from the Rigelian Science Consortium this morning, Professor Lirith added, slithering up to join the conversation. They're particularly interested in applying your methodologies to their bioengineering programs. Something about Earth's evolutionary patterns offering insights into genetic adaptation. Sarah nodded. Life on Earth had to adapt to constantly changing conditions. That forced us to develop incredible genetic flexibility. The principles behind that adaptation could help create more resilient bioengineered systems. A small crowd had gathered around them now, students and faculty alike drawn to the discussion. Sarah saw faces, and other sensory organs, that would have seemed alien and frightening to her just a year ago. Now they were colleagues, friends, fellow explorers in the vast mystery of the universe. You know, Axel called from their teaching station, I've been thinking about what makes human problem solving so unique. It's not just about survival or pattern recognition. Oh. Sarah raised an eyebrow. What is it then? It's your willingness to try things that seem impossible. Axel's gaseous form shimmered with conviction. When we told you the Helios paradox was unsolvable, you didn't accept that. You looked for a solution anyway. Because on Earth, accepting impossibility often meant death, Flax added. You had to find a way, no matter what. Sarah considered this. Maybe. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe humans just never learn to stop asking, what if? Dean X. Whiteowl's energy form pulsed thoughtfully. Perhaps that is humanity's greatest contribution to galactic science, not your solutions, but your questions. Your refusal to accept limitations. Speaking of questions, Sarah said, pulling out her ever-present notebook, I've been thinking about the quantum tunnel effect we observed last week. You know how it reminds me of the way earthworms navigate through soil. The gathered academics leaned in, their various sensory organs focused intently. 6 months ago, they would have dismissed such a comparison as primitive and irrelevant. Now they knew better. In the vast tapestry of the universe, every thread was connected. Sometimes it just took a Deathworlder's perspective to see the pattern. As Sarah began sketching her latest theory, she couldn't help but smile. Humanity had found its place in the galactic community not despite their harsh origins, but because of them. Their primitive survival adaptations had turned out to be exactly what the galaxy's greatest minds needed, a fresh perspective, a new way of seeing the infinite patterns that connected everything from quantum particles to cosmic phenomena. And this was just the beginning. As more humans joined the Academy, bringing their unique perspectives and earth-forged problem-solving abilities, who knew what other, impossible, problems might yield to the power of Deathworld thinking. The universe, after all, was full of patterns waiting to be discovered. Sometimes all it took was looking at them from a different angle, perhaps from the perspective of a species that had evolved on a planet that never stopped trying to kill them. In the end, that was humanity's gift to the galaxy, not just the solutions they found, but the way they taught others to look for them. And in that gift, both humans and aliens found something greater than mere knowledge, they found understanding.